Hi there, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today for an AWS webinar on Find Your Voice and Increase Your Influence. We're so excited that Samara and Jody from AWS team are here to present with you today. And before we get started, I just wanted to introduce myself. My name is Lynn Dome. I'm Women in Cybersecurity Executive Director. We often go by our acronym WICYS, W-I-C-Y-S, and we pronounce it we sisters, we sis, like we sisters, because that's exactly what we are. We are a cyber sisterhood. And we're a 501c3 member-based organization. We have over 5,000 members and have representation in over 70 countries. Our mission is to recruit, retain, and advance women in cybersecurity, and we do so by creating opportunities. So we have an online member forum where all our members can network and connect. Within the forum, we have special interest groups such as neurodiversity and cybersecurity law, data privacy. Whatever conversation you want to get tuned and tapped into, you certainly can through our online member forum. We have many different skill development training programs. We have newsletters, webinar series, scholarships, grants, and awards, not only for our conference, which is March 17th through the 19th in Cleveland, Ohio, but other conferences as well. Our Cyber Talent Emergency Fund is set up for students that are within their last 4 semesters of finishing their college education. And if they have a financial emergency like a medical bill or their car breaks down, they could apply and receive up to $599 within 48 hours. We have many speaking and media opportunities because we want our members to be what others can see. And our Job Board Plus Plus is developed for strategic partners like AWS that brings you today's webinar to post all their jobs in. Also for all our members to update their profiles and add their resumes and get recruited from our Job Board Plus Plus. In addition to that, we participate in market research. We launch apprenticeships, internships. We have leadership summits and virtual and in-person career fairs, financial assistance for veterans, military spouses, and active duty. And of course, we have our mentor-mentee program where we designed and developed a 12-month structured framework to upskill and up-level women no matter where they're at in their career, preparing them for their next level of advancement. We have this and so much more. So we owe all that as a special thanks to our strategic partners, AWS, that brings us today's webinar. We have Bloomberg, Carnegie Mellon Software Engineering Institute, Cisco, Facebook, Google, Lockheed Martin, Microsoft, Optum, SentinelOne. We also have AbbVie, JP Morgan Chase and Company, LinkedIn, Navy Federal Credit Union, Nike, Wayfair, and Workday. And our tier 3 partners are Accenture, American Airlines, Arctic Wolf, Champlain College, Dell Technologies, InvestNet, Flatiron, Fortinet, Haystack, Here Technologies, the Home Depot, IBM, Indiana University, MITRE, Motorola Solutions, Oak Ridge National Lab, Palo Alto Networks, PayPal, Salesforce, Sands Institute, Schlumberger, SmoothStack, SpearTip, Starbucks, Target, University of California, San Diego, and Verizon. It is a growing list of strategic partners, and we are so thankful for everyone's ongoing support. So today's our day here with this AWS team. Samara and Jody are here to answer all the questions that you might have, and they're going to be having a candid conversation about finding your inner voice and increasing your influence through that. So we're so grateful to have them, and we'd encourage everyone at the bottom of your screen to put all your questions in the chat so that they could answer them live. And before I hand it over to the AWS team, I just want to encourage those new to the WICYS organization to join us. You can subscribe to our newsletter and join us as a member and engage with us on social media. We're on all social platforms. So without further ado, I'd like to hand it on over to Samara, and so she could take the conversation from here.
All right, great. Thank you. And welcome, everyone. I just want to thank everyone for joining, and it's exciting to be here and part of WICYS. I love it. We're going to kick off just starting to tell you a little bit about ourselves before we dive in, and then get into an exciting discussion. And again, please think of some questions and be prepared to ask us any questions you may have at the end. So Jody, can you kick us off with an overview of your background?
Sure. Before beginning Amazon, I spent 15 years as a former financial services regulator and in-house compliance director. I've now been at Amazon for 7 years starting in March, which feels like forever, but yet not long enough. And I continue to build teams focused on meeting the highest bar of assurance for our customers and their regulators. And I'm very excited to be having this conversation because it's been, a 20-something year journey to get where I am today. And Samara, why don't you tell the group a little bit about you?
Sure. Well, I'm here at AWS for a little over 2.5 years. I think I'll work backwards for my background. And I'm here actually thanks to Jody who sought me out. Thank you. And here at AWS, similar to Jody, I work with internal and external stakeholders to really help our customers in regulated industries like public sector, financial services, healthcare, energy. We work to help them meet their compliance obligations and their compliance needs. So prior to AWS, I worked for a large energy company, again, supporting security and compliance for critical functions. And I have about 10 years of government service, again, driving security for really critical functions. And, I'd say this whole wonderful journey started off in consulting. And it's interesting, sort of the winding turn that I've had to bring me here, but I'm so happy here and excited to be able today to share with you some of the lessons that I've learned along the way. So to get started, we're going to talk about a few different ways to help you find your voice and make an impact. And also something, we'd like you to think about is helping others to also do so. And so in our talk today, I wanted to come up with a magic number, so I came up with 3. There are 3 things that we would like you to walk away with, these 3, or at least one of them. One is the fact that, trying to find your voice and influence is something that we all deal with throughout our career, whether it's happened to you in the past, or trust me, it'll happen in the future. No matter how accomplished you are, there are situations where we have to find our voice and figure out how to influence in different situations. The second thing we want you to walk away with is just the fact that you are equipped to excel with what's already in you. The fact that you are in the job you're in, part of the team you're on, supporting the project you're supporting means that someone saw value in you and what you bring to the table. So don't worry about that part. It's in you, what you need to excel. And then the last thing we want you to walk away with is a few tips to sharpen your skills. So with that, I'll go into the fact and just highlight, if you were to go do a search on influencing styles, you'll find that there are different lists. Some say there are 4, some say 5, some say 9. But in general, there are some common ones are like asserting, convincing, negotiating, inspiring, even bridging between groups. If you really want to dive deep on the different styles of influencing, I encourage you to look. There are easily different studies, really good articles, even podcasts on different influencing styles. But regardless of your primary influencing style, you'll have the opportunity arise in your career and in your journey where you're going to need to adjust your style and apply your style to fit the situation. What we want to talk about today is it doesn't mean you have to go against who you are. And we'll talk a little bit about how we've experienced that in our past, how we've handled it, and then share some tips that can help you be authentic to who you are while still driving good influence within whatever organization you're in. So with that as a quick overview, Jody, I'm going to start with a question for you. Can you tell us, how do you define authenticity and what does it look like for you at work?
Yeah, it's a great question. For me, it means having an alignment between my beliefs and my actions. Like, how do I show up? And when I have to show up and where it fits in my organization, do I show up as I intend to show up? Because that is based on what I believe. When you know the right thing to do and you find a way to do it because you know and you feel it. Those moments where you left something unsaid or didn't act just to fit in, but you knew that you should have, and for that night you lose a night's sleep and it sort of looms over your head. Those are the moments I feel like you know there's misalignment somewhere, and maybe you can't tie them back to something. But I get the sense physically when I'm misaligned, when I didn't act authentically, or even sometimes, get my own authenticity in check.
Okay, cool. So I like how that real technical term you described it. What you were describing, a real technical term I like to use it is that icky feeling inside. You kind of know, right? And oftentimes you feel it afterwards, or it's that same feeling that drives you to speak up and engage.
Yeah. Can you give us an example of having to decide to be authentic?
Yeah, I have a few of those, but I'll speak to one that really, really hit home for me because I am generally a fairly soft-spoken person. And so my just natural style is to sit back and observe, and I will speak up when I have something to say or add to the conversation. I won't hold back necessarily, but I'm not one to speak just to be heard. In fact, that's like a pet peeve of mine. And so, what was happening is I would be fairly quiet in the meeting. When I had something to say, it would be impactful, but otherwise, I was fairly quiet in the meeting. And I was in a situation specifically where a more senior leader was really a little frustrated with me and pulled me off to the side and said, "Hey, you got to be more vocal in the meeting." And, this is a group of very vocal people and at times a very animated group. And my style just was not fitting in with that group. And I don't know if others listening in have had that kind of situation, but I think we probably have all been there. And for me, in this particular situation, I was uncomfortable because I just was not going to be vocal and engage the way they were. To be quite honest, it didn't align with my personality, and I don't know if I would have pulled it off. Right? It would have been rather awkward, right? But in that situation, I did recognize that I probably could speak up more to share my point of view, um, but do it in a way that was authentic to me. And so I had someone who coached me and who gave me some tips that I tried to use in this situation. And so what I learned was to provide feedback on a comment that was made that I agreed with, but then don't just say, yes, I agree, but explain why I agree and why I thought that was important. Another tip that I did, and this one is super basic, quite honestly, was just if I'm in the meeting, I keep little tick marks to make sure that I'm engaging and that the meeting doesn't go by and they haven't heard from me for at least the first half of the meeting. Um, and so what I found was I was able to engage more in a way that fit me. I was comfortable. Um, and I saw actually it did allow me to have more influence. I was actually able to get more done. I thought it was okay the way I was before, but I realized I could influence more. And so, what I also learned in that, or I would say, what I also through that situation gave my boss an opportunity to better appreciate this me for my style and my authentic ways. And, he later commented that I was right. He appreciated me being more vocal, but he recognized they didn't necessarily have to engage like everyone else in the room.
I really like that. And what I like most about it is you didn't just take the feedback and say, well, that doesn't fit for who I am, and not do anything about it. Like, it sounds like you really digested it and thought about how you can still show up authentically, but also consider the feedback and how, as a leader, like, people need to hear your voice, and they need to know that you're on board with what they're discussing, because they don't want to hear um, later that you weren't on board, so they're not quite sure where they stood with you. And so you were, it sounded like it probably took you some time to come to that, that approach.
Yeah, it did. I'd like to say it's a muscle that I've been building, right? But I do see the benefit of it, and I think the more you step out and engage, the easier it is, right? Um, so what I also learned though is whether you realize it or not, and I'd say even regardless of the role or position that you're in, you're always in a situation where you're influencing someone. Someone's watching you, right? Whether it's your boss, whether it's a peer, whether it's another colleague in the organization, someone may be watching, maybe looking up to you, or maybe evaluating you and you don't know. So, choosing to engage, choosing to share your voice and use your voice is just always so important.
Yeah.
So, all right, Jody, a question for you now.
We're saying
In
truth or dare, right? Like,
Sure. No. So for this one, we're in a trusted group with our sisters here. So, was there a moment where you realized that you had to really bring to bear your authentic self because you noticed that someone was paying attention or watching you?
yeah. The great thing I'm probably going to talk about multiple times throughout this is many of my failures. And I do think each of my failures are what brought me to where I am today because I get to learn from each of those experiences. But a few years ago, there was someone on our team who was in the process of getting promoted and she was struggling through the process. And later she had said to me, thank you so much for, just being really visible so that I could have a good sense of what it meant to be a senior manager on the team. And it was that moment that I realized, oh no, everyone is watching me and they think this is the right approach. And so there were a few examples where, we showed up at a meeting and I was being really authentic. And I think that there's sometimes a difference between home authentic or friend authentic and work authentic. And when I had an experience where I was showing up with my team more in front of people and I was vocally being frustrated on an issue consistently, I noticed the team started doing the same thing. And it was like, I don't want them acting like this. Why do they think it's appropriate to voice all these frustrations and we're spending 45 minutes in a meeting just complaining? And then I took a moment to reflect of, well, that's how I'm showing up. Like I'm spending the first 5 minutes complaining. And so now everyone is just piling on. And so I did have, and then thinking about the broader aspect of it's not my team, just my team I influence when I show up to a meeting, or the things I say, or the things I choose to complain about, or be vocal about. I have to think about um, like how I'm going to show up, and so to some degree, all of that being able to watch like how my behavior impacts other people and influences other people has changed how I'm off, like not that I'm not authentic, but that I've truly changed as a human being where I don't want to sit around with people who like are complaining. And so I don't want to be that person. And so I think some of it too has been um, like influencing who is my authentic self, and growing from those experiences and those very sometimes very public failures.
Yeah, I really like what you, I think, are calling out here is that being authentic doesn't mean that you don't grow and mature as a person, as a profession, and as a professional. As regardless of what career you're in, we all seek out coaching or mentoring. And I think it's to help sharpen our skills. There's a way to be authentic while still growing as a person and a professional. So thank you for being transparent and calling that out.
Yeah. So I talked a little bit about influencing people, Samara. How do you define influence, and how has it, shown up for you?
So I trying to keep it in really simple terms. I define influence as the ability to have an impact on your organization in such a way that it can help to shape an outcome. And I frame it that way because, like I mentioned before, we're always influencing whether we need it or not. But sometimes when we have an idea or we bring something forward, the end result may not be what we brought forward. But what we contribute in sharing our voice really helps to shape that outcome and is very important and very much needed in our organization.
Yeah, I think even with the pandemic, the more we can share our vulnerabilities a bit about like how tired or burnt out we are on a regular basis. And I know that I have to check myself sometimes before I go into meetings. I know we were joking about Monday was a day I had to cancel some meetings because I knew I couldn't show up with my best self, and be properly authentic. And so, I think about how I'm going to influence everyone. Can you share an example when you saw someone demonstrate influence in your career?
Yeah, I actually have a couple of examples that are a little bit different, but I wanted to share both stories. Um, in one example, and this is really someone who really influenced me in my career. And this is a former boss I had when I worked in the government. She was really a great example of driving influence across the organization. She was the lead for an IT organization and was able to successfully drive significant change that was needed for the business. Now, if you've been involved in any significant change efforts, you know that it's not easy. It's not a simple task and really requires a lot of influence. And so, despite multiple objections to the change, she was always knowledgeable on the issue and offered solutions, um, and was able to be open to get feedback from others to help shape the final solution. One of her biggest areas of influence is that she would bring something forward, work toward solution, but it didn't always have to be her idea, right? Or so we thought, right? She was really good at helping to shape things to get to the right solution, which many times may come back to the foundation of what she originally offered. But what she did to influence is what I really want to hone in on. She would spend some time and really develop a business case. But beyond that, she would have at least three options. But then she would spend time understanding the perspectives of the different stakeholders involved ahead of the meeting. So she would always, say, hey, don't show up to the meeting and not appreciate the position that the other stakeholders are coming in with. And so um, with that, it really helped us, one, to be more prepared, but then it allowed her to guide the discussion and ask the right questions to keep us moving towards a solution. I thought that was just amazing and brilliant. I thought she had like magic pixie dust. But when I watched her do it over and over again, I realized that there was a method to what she was doing, and it really worked. Um, and because of that, she was consistently able to get the budget she needed, or some may argue whether or not it was sufficient, but the budget needed to drive and be successful at significant change in the org and in the IT environment. So from this example, I do try to follow that. And I found that in doing so, it doesn't just help you in that particular situation, but it's actually really helpful for you in just forging relationships with stakeholders that you need to work with. When you sit down and listen to them and understand where they come from, it allows you to influence and then have a voice well beyond just that specific effort that you're working.
Yeah, there's a big difference between just showing up and just saying a bunch of buzzwords and actually doing the work to know what who's going to be in the room, what positions you need to take, what positions they're going to take. There's a lot of prep that I think strong leaders do, and I like the pixie dust thing because I do think even as a younger person, at one period of time I thought, oh, there will be a moment in time where I will just be able to do all these things just because like and that you don't always see you almost never see the work that go into the executive prep for meetings, the things that they go and read, the things that they go and explore that are completely outside of the project or the conversation, but just to prepare themselves for all the different places it could go. So that's a keen observation.
Yes, yes. She's an excellent leader. So still consider her a mentor today. Another example I'll give you is a little bit different. And this is an example of how someone influenced a project. And in this project, I was tasked to lead an effort to drive a significant change initiative with multiple industry partners. And to gain their support, I did my work. I did what I learned. I prepared the business case. I went to where they were, right? And I knew that there would be real objection because we were trying to move something forward that where there was a perception that it would add additional oversight for an industry that was already, heavily regulated. Um, and I went in there expecting it to be an interesting meeting, but I was prepared. Boy. Okay, so I wasn't prepared for the earful that I got, and I got quite an earful, right? The stakeholders made a point to share all the reasons why it wouldn't work, especially in the short time frame that we were requesting this to be done in, which was about 6 months. And so we had a break in the meeting, and one of the stakeholders, he took me aside and he asked me a few questions to confirm that we were aligned. And I think he was trying to figure out, can he trust my intent and where we were going? Then he shared that he would back me up, and he proceeded to use his voice to influence the group to support the change initiative. And it was almost like, again, he had that pixie dust, right? Because he came in and, he, like me, is a more soft spoken person, but he got the attention of that group and he got the support of that group, not by being loud or animated, but really by just being himself and explaining different ways to view the initiatives. But he was able to connect with them in a way that I wasn't. And what I learned from that, was I don't have to do it all on my own. I can find good partners, again, to help amplify my voice, right? And to help me influence as well. He was someone who had the trust of others because he had years of partnering with them. And he was able to understand their concerns in a way that I couldn't and find a way, again, a solution to connect with them just in a way that I couldn't. So, in that experience, I learned a lot about how I can better drive influence. Again, I can be my authentic style. It was great seeing someone with a similar style just go in there and kill it, right? Do an amazing job. But then I also it just really underscored the value of integrity, earning the trust of your partners, and strong relationships again.
Yeah. And I think sometimes it's really valuable when people in the meeting are repeating back what you have put forward. And sometimes it can be like, why is someone re-explaining I just said all of that. And it's like, yeah, but like somebody is putting their voice behind it, their support behind it. And it's not a re-explanation, but is this, this is what I understand Samara to be saying, and reaffirming their support for your position.
Yeah, exactly. So we've had a little fun with story time here, telling some stories from experiences that we've seen. Hopefully that's resonated or connected with some of your experiences on your journey. Now we want to talk about a few useful points that we'd like to share with you on influencing others that we've gathered from our years of experience and from coaching and mentoring with others. So I, again, tried to keep it to a concise number here. So I have 5 points I'll highlight with you. The first one is on building trust and just connecting with others. If you find that you can engage with others across your org or even external stakeholders, it really helps you to build that trust to where your voice will be sought after for a different effort or initiative. If you're not already doing so, seek those opportunities out. It makes a world of difference to already have that trust built before you have to engage. The other point that I have around connecting with others is listening, right? Being open to listening to others. We've also often heard the phrase, we've got 2 ears and 1 mouth, right? But be able to listen and then really try to take in what you're hearing and adapt your points or address the situation from their perspective. And then the third point I'll make on connecting with others is to be open to validating your assumptions and be open to challenges to your view. You'll likely find that you'll end up with a stronger position, but then you'll gain that buy-in and again that trust and support from others. So Jody, anything else you'd want to share on the first point?
No, I think you got everything there.
Okay. All right. So the second point I have is to understand the influencing mechanisms that exist in the environment you're in. Both Jody and I talked about just different experiences that we've had just along our career. We've worked in different types of organizations with different cultures. Understand what works in your organization, because what works in this organization may not work in the next one, right? Or what worked for you in your previous organization may not work in your current. So an example that I'll give you is at Amazon, we have a document writing culture, right? If you want to influence, you want your points to be heard, you create a doc. And that explains your points and your position and why. And the impact to our customers. Well, in other organizations, we didn't quite do that, right? We may have had PowerPoints or other ways that you go about engaging and communicating particular position. But for us, you really can drive influence by writing. Another example is other organizations may have different types of decision-making bodies that you can engage in to influence, like working groups or committees. So the point there is just to understand what works in the environment that you're engaging in.
Or create them, right, Samara?
Yeah. Or create them for sure. The next one I have is to be knowledgeable on the topic. So, be willing to deep dive and leverage others as you are either engaging, whether it's just a meeting that you're going to and to contribute to, whether it's a project or a program you're a part of. But, be willing to roll up your sleeves and really bring knowledge to the table, make the case, right? Use data to tell your story, and then focus on outcomes and impact. And, we gave a couple of examples where that really made the difference. And what helps sometimes to be able to do that is some folks are like brilliant. For me, I can't keep everything up here. So I make notes, right? And that way I'm prepared. So when I come to the meeting or I'm in the situation, maybe it's not always a meeting environment, I have my notes that I've thought through so I can be more present and provide, better input in a particular engagement.
What I like about this one, Samara, is like the I versus the we. We recently had someone on our team who was talking about, well, I decided this and I decided that. And we think of our right a lot, the leadership principle, where you surround yourself with a committee. Like I have my own women board of directors who I have a women's group, but then I also have like my own personal board of directors of people who have to hold me to account, to show up, and these are the people I go for counsel. And so when you say be knowledgeable on the topic, I think of, have a group of people around you that can check you and check, like, are you thinking deeply? Are you prepared? And who are there to make sure, you can really be your best self.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think all of that, when just hearing you talk about that, it reminds me of just building confidence, right? So you having that hype group, right? That can build you up because you've reviewed it with them. They're reminding you of it. They're giving you extra points to help you be more prepared. So I really love that. Okay, so the fourth one that I have for you is to be willing to speak up, have some backbone, and disagree when it's time to disagree, right? And share alternatives. As someone who has been, leader in different formats, one of the things I love is when people will share different views and opinions. One of the things that really bothers me is when I hear of a differing opinion outside of the forum when we were addressing it, right? So be willing to speak up. If you, again, feel that ickiness inside and something you want to say it, right? It adds value and it will only strengthen the effort or the initiative that you're engaged in. Um, but also be willing to drive towards solutions, right? And again, we talked about this earlier, not necessarily just your solution, but be open to others' solutions, right? But be willing not just to raise a concern or an issue, but be willing to help be part of getting to a solution for that. So a saying that one of my last employers we used to have, I mean, we literally had signs up in like the printing room that said, no meetings after the meetings. And I loved it because it was urging you to, hey, speak up, let your input, your concerns be heard. And it was also encouraging us to encourage others to do that. So at the end of the meeting, sometimes we say, okay, anything else to say? Let's put it all on the table. And I love that environment because it opens it up for other voices to be heard.
Yeah, and I see we have a question kind of related to this. Is, kind of, do you feel like you need to suggest solutions every time? And I would say, there may be times where I will express now, like, I don't like the way this is operating, or our numbers are too low. We need to take this back for a solution, because I can be very quick to say, we should go do this. And what I had to, because I'm very, like, other people are aware of the things that I say, is if I say we should go do this, someone will go do it. And what I really mean is somebody should go look at this, dissect it, and see if there is multiple solutions, one of which we should maybe pick as part of the thing. So you can bring solutions, but I also think that sometimes it's not about bringing the solution in the room, but it's telling, okay, we need to take a step back, and evaluate. So leaving things unsaid, to your point, I think you're also saying is sometimes it's we need to take this problem back. Like we obviously have a lot of questions in the room. I know we've seen doc reviews where it pretty much goes off the rails because there's a lot of challenge to the assumptions that are in the document, and there's not enough data, and people can't make the final decision to go forward. And so it is just a go back and do more, rather than, so there is sometimes a meeting after the meeting, but it's a new meeting.
Yeah.
Right?
No, that's a good point. And thank you for asking that question. And Jody, thank you for helping to clarify that, right? And I think it really gets to my next and final point that I wanted to mention was following through. And so sometimes, we may not get to a solution in the moment, but it's also staying connected and helping to make sure that a solution does happen, right? And I don't, many of us have been in situations where something will be raised and something will be discussed, but then you come back 2 months, a quarter, 6 months later, and you're still discussing the same challenge. And so this is really following through and helping to drive to a solution here. Again, your voice becomes really impactful. You really drive influence when you become known for delivering, right? And following through. So before we go into some broader questions here, I just want to say we've touched on it a little bit in some of our discussion already, but one amazing way we all can not just share our voice and influence others, but to help others share their voice is to drive inclusivity in the environments that you're operating in. So simple things you can do to make all the difference, right? If we're going into an important discussion, right, making sure that people have information on what's going to be discussed to give them the opportunity to prepare. Some people are really awesome geniuses and think really, really quick on their feet. Some people need to digest it for a little bit before they can really engage deeply. Both are amazing contributors to the project or the program, right? So that's just one way that a very simple way that you can help others find their voice by being more inclusive. Also, encourage others to provide their viewpoints. And Jody, I'll kind of put you on the spot to share a few ideas because you do this really well in some of our meetings in making sure that other voices are being heard when we, especially when we have large or remote groups together.
Yeah, I tend to seek out people who I think are going to be a dissenting voice in the room. I feel like if I put an idea forward and everybody's like, yeah, this is great, let's go. I'm like, this is a terrible idea. Like, this is like something, like somebody has to call something wrong with my approach because I certainly did not sit down and write a beautiful idea and document that's perfect. That did not happen. It has never happened. So I would rather know what the risks are on the project. And so I have a tendency to build relationships with people I think are, like I said, I have a board of directors, but I also probably have subcommittees, like people who are, if I'm going to go and talk to regulators, people who are really brave when it comes to talking to regulators, and other people who are um, maybe will err on the side of lower risk. And so I try to find a group of people who will balance out. Some will be overly talkative, some will not. And then I know that it's my job in the room to facilitate the discussion. I have a tendency when I'm in a meeting, if it's my meeting, I'm facilitating the discussion. So if I want someone, if I feel like someone's had enough floor time, like I will go and say, okay, thank you. Thank you, person A. I would really like to hear from you, person B. And that inclusivity, like not everyone is brave enough to feel like they can talk in the room. If you put our vice president in the room, most people will wait for him to speak first. But at our company, it's actually backwards. Like he wants to hear everyone else's point of view. And even being in meetings with Andy Jazzy, he will not speak until there's like 2 minutes left, and then he will knowledge bomb the deepest question you could ever think of so that you can't answer it, and that all it is a question for you to walk away and be able to think about before you go forward. And I like that approach, and so I think of inclusivity as, you know, being a facilitator in the meeting, and then also being the last to speak, so that I don't influence everyone else's viewpoint and I don't just get a bunch of yeses. Let's do it.
All right, thank you. So with that, Jody, are there any key takeaways? We did some prep for this meeting and we're excited to talk to you all. Did we miss anything, Jody? Is there anything else we should cover?
I mean, I think kind of on the point you said about inclusivity, neither of us got here without people helping us to get here. Like, I love when people say, like, I did this all on my own. Like, I most certainly did not do all this on my own. I did work on a trading floor and did have to be strong every day because I was the only woman on the trading floor. But I did that with the support of my colleagues. There's really little things that people did every day to make me successful, remind me to be confident, remind me that I've done great work. And those little things are people who've gotten me where I am today. And so, we hope these stories connected with you and you're able to walk away with some tips. It's a journey, and there's no compression algorithm for experience. That's something Andy says and people repeat in our company, because I get the question all the time, like, how can I get there faster? How can I be more confident faster? You got to fail more. You have to seek out more challenges. You have to get experience failing eloquently and being able to sleep at night after you had a big failure and just say, all right, I'll get them tomorrow. And be curious. And you said this, be curious about what you don't know or have experience in, and go get that experience. You have to, if you want a career, you have to think about your career. You have to imagine your career, and you have to surround yourself with the people who are going to get you there, because they're going to be partners in that journey.
Well said. Thank you. All right. Well, with that, we are open. We wanted to leave at least 15 minutes for any questions that you all may have from the audience. So we've had one question so far. Please do queue up any additional questions that you may have. Otherwise, we're going to have to keep questioning each other. So we do have a couple of questions we can keep asking each other while you think of some, but I really do encourage you to interact with us and propose any questions you may have.
Well, we have one, Samara. So
Okay.
I just talked about building confidence. And so how do you build it quickly?
How do I build it quickly? I want to kind of key off of something you just mentioned, just getting out there. So I went through this coaching program a few years ago, and one of the biggest takeaways I took from that program was a simple statement that says, "Don't take yourself so seriously." And I literally for the longest would have it on a sticky note on my monitor. And basically what it's saying, be willing to take risks, right? Um, you've gotten to this point, you're competent. Just get out there and engage and do what you've been trained, what you've learned to do. And the more that I step out there and take risks, I build confidence. But sometimes I need that hype team, like you were talking about, that board of directors to say, hey, you've got it, girl. So I reach out to them when I need it, and it helps. I also, though, remember my past experiences. And I remember those times where the consequences of me not stepping out and or not being authentic, how I felt, again, that icky feeling inside. But I also remember those times where I went out there and guess what? It wasn't so bad when I stepped out there. When I took that risk, sometimes I failed, but I was able to pick up from it and learn, and become stronger. But other times it was awesome. And I was so glad that like I stepped out there and did it. So that's how I built my confidence, leveraging my hype crew and then remembering my past experiences to remind me it's really not that scary.
I love that because my hype crew got me these 3 bracelets as just a reminder that they are my hype crew. And everyone sent a picture today randomly of their of their bracelets. So we're all hyping each other up today. And the thing you said about just getting out there, like I remember presenting at reInvent in front of 1,000 something people. And being like, I am not going to be able to do this. I won't remember what to say. I'm going to look stupid. And granted, I won't watch the video because nobody likes the sound of their own voice. um, I think of that moment as like, if I could do that, like I remember how scared I was. If I could do that, like I can pretty much do anything. That's a very scary thing. All right, another question, which is a really great question. I think we had sort of prepared for this one. How do you work as an influencer or change agent when you don't have a seat at the table?
Okay. So that's a good one. And it's funny, we were thinking about that. And we have a perspective here at AWS around the fact that everyone's a leader. And so whether you have a seat at the table, whether leadership is somewhere in your title, you're all a leader. And we're really all an owner and a leader in some way. And so you can drive influence, quite honestly, by following the points that we made earlier, right? So connecting with others, building those relationships, understanding their viewpoints, where they're going, what their interests and needs are, and how what you bring to the table can help support those. Um, Figuring out how do people engage and drive things forward in your organization? What are those influencing mechanisms? Being willing to dive deep so that as you are connecting and engaging or you have ideas, bring them forward, right? And by the way, just because you bring them forward, they may not always be welcomed. I can't tell you how many times I've been told no or not yet. And I view it generally when if I feel strongly about a particular point, unless I've received counterpoints that I do listen to that might change my view, I say, okay, let me go dive a little bit deeper. Let me do more homework. And I take that no to mean not yet. um, my persistence has paid off. And I found that, particularly when I wasn't in a leadership role, when I was told no, to come back with a better case or more data points or maybe something they haven't considered. Or sometimes I'll say, well, why? And when I get the why, then I take it, I go back, I do my homework, and I come back with an adjusted solution. And then in finding my voice, I think just being present, it really helps. And then I find that as I deliver, as I'm engaged, I start to get invited, right? Sometimes I'll get invited and have a seat at the table. Sometimes I'll get invited and I might be in the chair along the wall. And they're like, hey, just come and listen. You don't have to engage, but, just come and listen so you can see. And so I take advantage of those opportunities, and they continue to open more doors. Jody, anything else you'd add to that from your perspective?
Yeah, I mean, so the second part of the question is specifically when you aren't invited to the meetings. And like, I do remember a time when I first started at Amazon and I was in New York and the entire team was in Seattle, and I missed probably 90% of what was going on in the world that I owned. And so, and so our culture, allows us to take deep ownership. And I do think, like, I don't know, Samara, what do you think about the aspect of there are times like, what I think is interesting is like, I think to some degree we talk about like, maybe not right now. I think that's almost like a new brand of when is it time to quit? Because there is a time to quit, and there is a time to say, like, this is not the culture for me. Like, it is not inclusive. It is like, I am supposed to own this thing, or I am supposed to drive the strategic direction of this thing, or I have good ideas about this thing and nobody will let me in the room. Those are the moments where I think you need to put your cards on the table, lay them out, and decide, like, if this is worth fighting for and this is where I want to be, like, I will do whatever it takes to get there. And I think that is when you find your voice. And I think those are the moments where you're like, and if you don't have that, you need to go, like, those are the moments you don't have to I don't love regulatory compliance. I don't wake up in the morning and go like, oh my God, this is the most amazing thing I've ever done. I do love the challenges, and I'm inspired and have passion for how hard the work is. And that drives me. So like, when you think about, am I going to stay in this culture where I'm not being included, or like, I can't bring my voice in because I'm like, you can't get to that next level, or you can't get your point across, or nobody will listen for you and you're constantly diminished. I think there is for me anyway, I don't know what you think about that, Samara, but I think there is a walking away point.
Yeah, I certainly think, and thank you for calling out the second part of that question. I think that's an important thing that many people face. I know I faced it before, and do try, right? Try to, address the issue, try to raise it. Sometimes you have to go to different people to do so. But if it's just an environment that's not inclusive, then you've got to figure out, is this the right fit for you? Being on particularly and sometimes in a large environment, different leaders may not recognize what's going on. So do talk to different folks and see if there's something that can be done. I think a challenging part is when you see good people leave and then you never had the opportunity to support them and help them out, right? So I would say, do feel open to talk to other leaders. But if you come to the point to where it's just not that kind of environment, then you should evaluate what makes sense for you in your career.
Now, I'm going to give you this next one again because you did a career switch to come to AWS, a big career switch. And I know sometimes your career tries to pull you back consistently. So when switching careers, how do you start influencing in your new area when you are changing your trajectory? And this person is going from traditional legal to cyber law and policy advising.
So really good question. The way I start to do it, and I'll say I'm not perfect at this, right? But the way I try to do it, one is I recognize that I'm switching careers and I've got a lot to learn, especially if, say, you were doing really well and where you came from and you're in a completely new environment. Recognizing that I've got a lot to learn and taking the time to learn. But on the other hand, also recognizing that, hey, I was brought on board because I bring something unique, and to not be afraid to speak up on what I uniquely bring to the table and contribute, and allowing others to learn along the way as well. And then just starting to build the muscle, really stepping out, asking a lot of questions. And then when I learn it, trying to apply it to what I bring to the table to collectively help the organization be stronger. At times I may have my what do we call it, imposter syndrome, and how am I here? This is not my background. How did I get here? But again, engaging with good supporters, it really helps to remind me of why I'm here and that I've got it.
I like what you said in terms of, you emphasize learn and be like our learn and be curious. We try to encourage people when they start at our company, because some of our leadership principles conflict with each other. And so the first 3 months, it's like, while we hired you because you are incredibly smart, you actually spend a great deal of time, exercising learn and be curious over bias for action. Because bias for action, when you haven't learned everything about why we've made decisions, or like what are really basic. I mean, if you're going into a policy role, what is the company's basic positions? And for the ones that maybe you don't agree with or understand, like how are you going to go to the next level of questions? What are those next level of questions? And so make sure you explore all of that before you start executing on the I'm going to tell everyone that my position is, because what works for one company doesn't always work for the other.
Yeah. But you'll find, again, you probably have some great ideas, and be open to getting feedback on your ideas. And then when they give you the feedback, be really inquisitive. It's like, okay, can you help me understand why, and how should I look at this differently? So don't be afraid to ask a lot of questions. I don't see it as vulnerability. I see it as strengths. Um, and if anyone knows your background, they know you got to learn. So they're probably wondering why the questions aren't coming, right? So it's okay, but just be open to dive deep and learn. All right. So I believe we have covered all the questions that we've received so far. I've enjoyed this conversation, and even in this remote format, I really miss seeing all of you guys, but appreciate the questions that did come forward. Jody, is there anything else you want to cover before we wrap up?
No, just thank you to everyone for coming. Um, and we hope to see you out at one of the next conferences.
All right. Thank you all.